Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Work on Climate Success Story Spotlight event. My name is Lena. I volunteer for Work Climate events team, and today we'll host, and it's my honor to host Statton and Julia, and hear about their stories, how they got into work on climate, and what their advice would be for people who is on the journey to looking for a job for in climate. So we'll have a bit of a structured Q&A, like lined up questions from us, and then we'll have unstructured short Q&A and ask people if they have any questions for you guys. So would you, who wants to start to the short introduction? Julia?
I realize I'm gesturing probably with
gesturing. Okay. we're standing here on too much politeness. Okay, I'll just jump in and say first of all, thank you, Lena and Work on Climate, for inviting me to on this panel with Julia to talk about our experiences. I am a lawyer by profession and have been doing mostly internet law and policy for a greater part of a decade. But a few months ago, I made the decision that I wanted to tackle the biggest problem I think of, and that is climate change. So I pivoted, and I'll be happy to talk a little bit more about that in detail. But right now I'm Assistant General Counsel at a company called Aspiration, which offers sustainability services and green banking financial services as well. And I can talk about those for those of you who are interested. Once again, I'm happy to be here, delighted to talk to you and share about my experience transitioning to climate, and looking forward to having a great conversation. Thanks, Lena.
Thanks, Statton. Julia, you want to tell a bit about yourself?
Yeah. Well, I will echo the thanks to Work on Climate in general. I would not have my current job without Work on Climate as a community. So really happy to be giving back to everybody. I am not a lawyer. I am a product manager at a company called, a nonprofit called Green Wave, and we help train people to become regenerative ocean farmers. And my job is to help take all of their training that they've been doing in person and making that available online. But I can talk more about just like my journey as a product manager, and because it's kind of a wily one. And I've worked in a bunch of nonprofits before this, so that's kind of where my experience is. But yeah, happy to give help wherever I can.
Cool. Thank you so much, both. Thrilled to have you on this panel. And let's start. And you both already gave a hint on this question, but what prompted you to work on climate at all?
I'll start first. We'll alternate, Julia. How about you and I take turns going first each time, so we don't too routine. Okay, so I was on the leadership team of a technology, an intellectual property company, and had done a lot of internet-related stuff, including enabling companies to get online and to do business, e-commerce platforms, social media platforms, website hosts, and domain name registries and registrars. I did that for a greater part of my career, also helping remove bad stuff off the internet, child sexual abuse material, illegal pharmacies, trademark and infringing content, that sort of thing. But as I left that world and was looking for the next thing to do, I really thought long and hard about the kind of work that I wanted to do in terms of its value, its intrinsic value, not the hard skill stuff that I would do as a lawyer or as a policy person, which I had done in other contexts, but like what work has intrinsic value to me. And for me, it's getting up every day and working for an organization, it could be for profit or not, that is tackling some of the most difficult challenges and problems that we face as human beings. And that could be, to me, that's, education and social justice and crime. And, there are a lot of other things that are just kind of like unsolvable problems, or I like to use the term just, problems that aren't easily solved. And the one I could think that is that most affects humanity is climate change. And I started really thinking about how I could make an impact on and do something to, keep the planet's temperature from increasing more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is by all climate science, a tipping point for us as humans on the planet. And what can I do to do that? And as soon as I made the internal commitment to do work on climate, it was amazing the support of communities, including Work on Climate and other communities who rose to help me find the opportunities that I was seeking. And that's really how it happened. It was making a decision, going to Terrado for a 12-week intensive course on climate science and climate finance and all this kind of other stuff to get a background knowledge. But then making the commitment is what created venom to pivot.
I guess many people can relate to your experience. Julia, what prompted you to work on climate?
Yes, I've always, like I mentioned, always worked in nonprofits, usually more with a kind of social bend. So before working at Greenwave, I worked at Fairtrade USA, which was all about human rights, workers' rights. Before that, I worked at a tech soup, which if you're in the nonprofit land is something that helps, bring everybody else up in the nonprofit world by getting them technology for cheap. So I've always been really interested in systemic change, as well as just anything to kind of help out or just do good in the world. And at the time, I didn't have a very big funnel. I wasn't as specific as to where I am now, but in my last job, I found myself working on more like fair trade labor laws and things. I'm still in the kind of technology sphere. And I realized that there's so many things you can do in the world, and it was still a good thing, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't where I found my focus. I found myself drifting actually at Fairtrade to being really interested in the things that our seafood team was doing there, and trying to learn more about kind of the ocean and just what's happening in food sustainability. And so it wasn't actually direct wake up one morning and was like, climate needs to be solved. It's obviously something that I would like to, but maybe like everybody else just seemed too big for me just to tackle. I didn't know how to go about it. And so I actually left my last job at Fairtrade and with no other job to go to, but I knew I wasn't getting what I wanted there. I wanted to do something with the ocean. I'm originally from Rhode Island, so I'm very just ocean oriented. And I then found myself just trying to figure out exactly the angle I wanted to go at. And as we know, this was COVID. And I actually joined Work on Climate when I think Work on Climate was like 800 people. I was referred to it by somebody else in the network. And that was kind of how I started to explore the space a bit more and just learn all these different things that people are doing. I really used my kind of unemployment time to just dive into things that interested me and learn more about sustainability and what's happening in different areas of climate and what I wanted to do. So I ended up just kind of focusing more and more on the ocean. And even though at the end of the day, what I ended up being really interested in was still in kind of the food sustainability perspective, but with more of kind of the environmental benefits that come from that. So whereas it's funny, I don't necessarily categorize my job as being like climate focused. My job is still and my interests are still very focused on improving just the environment and improving the ocean. But these things are, hand in hand in my mind. So that's how I ended up working in what I work on now. I feel like I won the lottery with my current job because I get to do like all the things I want. I get to work in the ocean Also, what we do helps with climate change. Also, it helps with food sustainability. So yeah, it's going. So that's how I ended up working on climate.
Mentioned many projects. Statton. Do you think, in your opinion, it's a good time to work on climate right now? Julia?
Why is it good? I mean, I would say, besides obvious, I'm currently in Italy where it's been like 95 degrees for the past week. And so it's, I think we're all here because we feel the urgency. We wouldn't be here if we didn't. And so I think one is, I don't feel I have any other choice. It's like, we have to work on this now. And I'm happy to be doing something. I don't want it to be, 20 years down the road and me say, why didn't I try and do something? So that's why now. Besides that, seems to just be an amazing amount of energy in the space. And because everyone's feeling that urgency, it's amazing to see all the different companies that people are founding on work on climate, even within working in seaweed, just seeing the amount of companies that are popping up all over the place. Just an amazing thing that's happening, especially having all these people create these different solutions that can help pitch in and bring in their different ideas. So I think that's.
I'll piggyback on some of what Julia said. First of all, setting aside the urgency of the problem, and the clock ticking before we can to get to net zero. I think now's the time for a couple of reasons. One is there is this momentum happening. There is a huge amount of investment going into the climate sector, right? I'm seeing an opportunity with. I would go to climate base and see who got funded in the last week, right? And the second reason is there are lots of pressure that companies are feeling from shareholders and investors and their employees to sustainability, but suite and an executive level to. We've already seen the Securities and Exchange Commission propose a regulation that would require public companies to be transparent in the impact that climate has on their companies and what they're doing about it. And so this is a wave that hasn't crested yet, but is building, and I think that makes the opportunity super ripe for folks to go into climate. Not to mention the fact that the kind of people that are in this sector doing well and doing good are some of the best people, best oriented people, best, some of the most passionate people you can have as colleagues. And if that doesn't, get you excited about doing climate and sustainability work, not much will.
Yeah, very true. And Statton, since you already touched on that, you mentioned that you used climate base as one of the resources for your job search. Can you describe your general approach to looking for opportunities in climate?
Yes. So after I made the commitment to do this, I started exploring what are the communities out there of people, the network of people that I could talk to, because I didn't have any experience in doing, climate or sustainability work. I think I took environmental law class in law school, but that was a long time ago. So I really didn't have a network of people, and I think that's the thing that you should focus on first is building those connections with people. And where I started was a few websites, including Work on Climate, Slack channel like Work on Climate. Another one was Climate Base. Another one was Ectopian Careers. And when I stop talking, I'll put these in the chat so folks can have these as resources. I reached out to somebody who was running an organization called Lawyers for Net Zero. And of course, my community in Terra.do, which was the original learning platform, I learned, got my basic knowledge about climate science and climate finance and sustainability and that sort of thing. So those were the sources I went to, got on those Slack channels. And then when I would see an opportunity, either a job post or a company that I, as I mentioned, had just gotten completed a funding round, or there was something newsworthy about that organization that intrigued me, I would send a note to the Work on Climate Slack channel and ask, and at Terra and some other ones, does anybody know anybody at X? And almost, I would say 80% of the time, somebody would come back and say, oh, so-and-so works at X. There's the connection. I reached out to so-and-so, had a chat. Maybe there was a job there. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe they weren't looking for a general counsel at that time. But that was really a great way for me to expand and get to know people who were working on climate issues. And that was very successful for me. So I highly recommend you joining, a couple of these Slack channels that have folks there that are working in different, sectors on climate work, whether it be regenerative agriculture or clean energy or whatever, if you have an interest in one particular thing, there's always a group that's doing it.
Thank you. Julia, what about you? Can you describe your general approach to job search in climate specifically?
Sure. Similarly to Statton, I also relied a lot on networks. Like I mentioned, I had a pretty broad entry to my own job search or discovery to figure out what I wanted to do. So I would say that first I did a lot of research. So that was, and by research, it was, I did anything that I found interesting. So that was listening to podcasts, reading a lot of books. So like just some basic things like that. And honestly, it was through podcasts that I first even heard about the company I currently work with. So just people who come talk about their companies, like that was, I found that as a good way for me to learn about companies. And then doing all the networking, reaching out to the people who I already know, who were in any way connected to this space, just asking them their advice on what I was trying to do. And then after the research, it was the community piece. I was very lucky that I got to work on climate when I did, and I threw myself into work on climate a bit. I volunteered a bunch. I with event planning. When I joined Work on Climate, the PM channel did not exist. And so I think I partnered up with some other people to try and figure out like, hey, what do PMs need? And so I had no idea what I was doing, but I ran an event and just gave my time to work on climate. And through those events, I actually met a fair amount of people. Besides that, I similarly on Work on Climate, I would randomly post in different channels saying, hey, I'm interested in seaweed. Does anyone know anything about seaweed? And it's amazing how many random strangers on the internet would be like, I'm happy to talk with you. And I had chats with people, face-to-face chats with strangers from Work on Climate who were starting their own startups about seaweed and were just giving their time to tell me about I knew nothing about at the time. So just a lot of putting yourself out there and not being afraid to ask, especially in the Work on Climate community. I thought that was great. And third, for when it came to actually applying to jobs, and I'm a big believer in this particular one because I used to be a job search coach, is being incredibly selective about what I applied to. So really trying to understand what like my skills were, the jobs that I was looking for, and only applying to ones where I knew those lined up and that I was really interested in. I applied to 2 jobs. I got interviews at both, and I got one of those jobs. So being incredibly selective, because it's really easy to burn out throwing your resume at a lot of people. But if you're really critical about what you're going after, like that made my job search in climate just all of that much easier. And also I found my job because I went and joined a work and climate event like this, and connected with my now coworker after that event. So joining work and climate events in general like this is also very helpful.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, super glad to hear that work on climate played this huge of a role in your current role. Are there any misconceptions about that people have working on climate in your specific domain in PM, say?
Misconceptions about this being a product manager and trying to get a job.
Yes, like
yeah.
There are no PM jobs in climate, or something.
Yeah,
like
I think product management as a job title is very confusing and hard to understand. I think people put a lot of there's a lot of misconceptions about just that in itself, not just in climate, just being a product manager. I remember from helping start up the PM climate group, there were all these questions about even not just about climate, just, what skills do I need and what makes, I think it's because in being a product manager, there's no set skills, there's no set background necessarily either. So for full transparency, I got a degree in art history, and I now work in tech. And I just did that through going through different jobs. And I think the skills that you need are, more combination of business analysis and being able to be an intermediary between people, being able to communicate people's needs. But generally when people see the word product management, they're like, I need to be a software engineer. And I need to then, go from being a software engineer to being a product manager, when really there are just so many flavors of product managers out there who come from marketing, who come from software engineering, who come from wherever. And at the end of the day, it comes down to, do you have just experience doing this type of work in terms of the communication and what they're looking for? And that's where it comes down to what I was saying before about being able to kind of read job descriptions and say, oh, this is the kind of thing I have done, versus trying to go after a product management job that is software oriented, because I wouldn't be necessarily a good fit for that type of job either. So I think the problem with product management is that there's this one title that encompasses a lot of different facets of what someone can be. And I think that causes a lot of churn for people and confusion. So I'd talked to the people I haven't been to the product management community channel in a while, but I think they've built out a ton of resources that I hope kind of define some of those pieces. That would be my suggestion for everybody here, if anybody's in product management.
Yeah, they did. And it's one of the biggest channels right now in work on climate.
Woohoo!
Statton, how about you? Do you have you met any misconceptions or misgivings about work on climate in a legal domain?
No, actually, but I put something here in the chat that I think I heard a lot when I was looking. And that is every job is a climate job these days. In other words, in every role, in every business, in every company, if you are committed to climate and sustainability, you can find something to do that is going to be helpful, whether it be encouraging your colleagues to do something, or if you're working on business development or marketing, are you working with vendors who have this as a focus, right, in their own businesses, right? There's every role can do something. I found that there weren't a whole lot of legal roles out there, as much compared to marketing, project management, and climate science, and what else were there a lot of jobs? Software engineering, right? So I think if anybody in this on the call is, got software engineering skills, climate research, policy and science experience, product management experience, marketing, business development experience, they're hiring a ton of folks in those roles. The problem with legal, if any of you are lawyers, is that a lot of these companies are innovating right now, and they're small companies, and they're not in a position to hire a full-time general counsel right now. They're relying on outside counsel for support that's often being given to them at either on pro bono basis, because the law firms want to say they're doing something for the climate. So what they're doing is just providing legal services to climate startups, which is fine, but that makes it harder to get inside if that's where you want to go. That was my experience, but I think, again, going back, every job's a climate job if you make it part of your job description.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions, but I think it's time to over the audience. If anyone has a question, please raise your hand or and ask it yourself, or you can put it in chat and we'll reply to it. And while we're waiting for people's questions, have you, I guess, Julia answered this question, but Statton have, did work on climate as a community play any role in your job search?
Yes, I mean, absolutely it did. I would go to work on climate, as I mentioned, whenever I saw an opportunity or a company name that I was interested in, but didn't know anybody there. And I got tremendous amount of feedback, suggestions, and help and introductions from the work on climate community. Now, for the particular job I ended up accepting and working at now at Aspiration, I can't say that work on climate was directly had a hand in me landing this particular role, but they certainly did in creating opportunities for me to have conversations with other hiring managers in other positions, which of course was tremendously helpful in me honing my message and being able to get my elevator pitch in about how passionate I was about committing to sustainability work. And that, of course, was, I think, in large measure, a reason why I was, successful at getting an offer at Aspiration, is because I had had those opportunities to talk and think about and discuss with other people, including those on work on climate, about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And they were very supportive in me in helping me get there. So definitely.
Thank you. Julia, and have you known any unusual or unique commonalities or differences between industries you worked in? I mean, you worked in nonprofit, but all the problems were different. Any unique or interesting differences?
Yeah, I feel like I should put in a plug for nonprofits in general, which is that someone told me once that, because I've only ever worked in nonprofits my entire career, which is some people would see as a downside, but someone once told me that working in for-profit just means that your life is easier because you have a lot of money. And I've worked in some very large nonprofits, and they have the same they're trying to solve a lot of similar problems that some for-profits are trying to solve. And some nonprofits have really amazing resources and even if they're smaller, so Greenway, for example, is only, we're under 20 people, but we actually have a fair amount of resources to do a lot of really great work. So don't write off something just because they're a nonprofit. I know you see startup and you think big dollar signs, big salary, but you'd be surprised sometimes with the nonprofits that are out there. So don't necessarily write those off. To answer your question specifically about differences in problems, I think that they're very transferable, but that could also be the type of role I have. My job is to help take people's problems and create technical solutions from them, or to find ways to make their lives easier by using tech. A lot of times in the nonprofits I've worked in, tech is not the central focus of what people are trying to do. You're not trying to push an app. You're not trying to build something fancy to download onto your phone. It's usually maybe more on the back end, to supporting people who are doing a lot of climate work in making their jobs easier to do that work, or trying to make it so that when I was at Fair Trade, like just tracking our certification systems. So it's not necessarily glamorous, or you're not out there doing anything super direct, but for me personally, I've always enjoyed being kind of on the support systems in the back, like kind of pulling the strings behind and making everything function that way. So I think that problem is something that has, crossed all of the jobs I've been at, just being able to provide support to everybody who is maybe doing either the legal work or who's doing more frontline work. So I think that's a commonality that I see between all the jobs I've done.
I'd just like to add to that, or just underscore Julia's point that it doesn't matter. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities in for-profit, nonprofit, public companies, private companies. If there's a kind that you prefer working in, I will say that I did look at the big companies for roles. The Microsoft and the Amazons of the world, since I'm based in Seattle, of course. But I knew I would be able to spread my wings wider and do more and say more with a smaller company. So for me, aspiration is 350 people. It's not tiny, but it's nothing like like a Microsoft. But I will say that if you're, sort of, on the experience side like me, that's like senior guys, getting close to 50, getting over 50 a little bit, you're going to be seen as more expensive by a lot of companies, including nonprofits. So, the reality is, they may not be able to afford you with the smaller budgets they have. So, that's a reality that you kind of face. And that's why, for me personally, what was driving it was not whether the company was nonprofit or for-profit or whatever, but whether it was mature and well-funded by whoever it was. So that, for me, that was going to be a good place, because they would be appreciative of somebody with, senior level business and legal experience that could add quickly to, to the business. So, but I do both. I mean, I do work for nonprofits, do some side hustle, pro bono legal work, and then I work, sort of my day job, too. So I try to, support as many folks as I can in the business, in the sector.
Statton, and getting back to the job search question, so Julia's approach was like more less applications but more refined. And what was your approach like? Did you follow the same path, or did you try to apply to many different places, maybe even outside of climate?
I did. I had a really terrible job search, lengthy job search, and it was soul crushing at times. And if anybody on this call is going through that, I feel your pain enormously. And if you need a shoulder to cry on, mine's already wet with my tears. So it was terrible. I generally, my approach was what I called a mindful application, approach, which was not applying to everything I was interested in, but applying to companies that, really were tackling challenges, as I said, that had jobs, or doing things that were intrinsically valuable. And, were the roles there were, a good match for my, hard skills and my soft skills. And when I did that, I applied. Now, 9 times out of 10, never heard anything, never got an interview, just rejection after rejection. The only thing that changed was that I started, not networking for a job, but networking to learn about climate. And it was that change in the tone of the conversation that I think created more willingness for people to help. Because when I was talking to folks about, opportunities in doing something else, it came across as, well, you're an experienced lawyer, but we've got experienced lawyers who are interested in this job. So there was no way to distinguish myself from every other person. But when I had conversations with people who were doing innovative work in climate, I was being able to speak from a more authentic, passionate place about my interest in doing something. And it came across as, look, I'm going to do that. They would now, instead of hear, I'm a qualified lawyer who needs a job, they would hear, wow, this guy is going to go do something. He's either going to do it with, at my company, or he's going to do it somewhere else. And that created sort of this, I think, it generated more interest in what I had to offer. So, I think your focus on climate work is the single most important thing to commit to. And because once you make that commitment that I'm not looking at any other jobs in fintech or, whatever, I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to work on solving this problem in some small way, shape, or form. Once you make that commitment, it's amazing how the world will rise to support you in that effort.
Yeah, I wanted to just say absolutely to what you were saying, Statton, in terms of networking for interest and curiosity instead of for a job. I think that's partially why my own job search was so successful, because I was coming from a place of, I know nothing and I just want to learn, and yes, I think everything is amazing. And I'm just so excited to talk to anybody who's willing to just nerd out with me about seaweed. And it was amazing how many other people felt the same way. That's how I just kind of used that interest to guide me and just continued to stay curious about anything and everything, talking to people about their companies and not just taking the job angle, but just expanding even some learning about other things from that way too. So I think that's an awesome point.
Yep, that's absolutely right. I can tell you on more than one occasion, I was talking to somebody with the intention, if with the intention of seeing if they would, hire me. And they would honestly say, I don't think we can afford you right now, maybe 6 months or whatever, but go talk to this person, right? People were just so willing to, if they couldn't hire me, they were so ready to help me find an opportunity. Because again, I wasn't really talking to them, for a job, although ultimately that was, obviously in my mind, but it was, tell me about, no-till agriculture robots you're building, right? It was a quirky thing. That's a company down the road is creating this little robots that go and remove weeds, right, without disturbing a lot of the soil and releasing the carbon. Really brilliant, but they can't afford a lawyer right now. But they definitely connected me with other folks that were willing to have conversations, and it was terrific, really terrific.
Thank you so much. We have questions from Wendy, but Joshua, you have raised hand. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Hi, thanks Statton and Julia. I think I learned so much from both of you guys. So I'm Josh. I'm a product manager for Western Digital, and I'm working on some sustainability initiatives, doing what I can here. And I had my own food startup in undergrad when I was at Cal, and I'm interested in moving my career into the intersection of human wellness and the way we treat our planet. So, sustainability is something I'm super interested in. And as someone who's kind of new to this entire industry and initiative, I was wondering if you guys have any recommendations on, just books or podcasts. Julia, I know you said you kind of built your interest based off podcasts and stuff. So I'd love to learn just what some of those are so I could get started too.
Go ahead, Julia.
I was just going to say on the podcast vein, unfortunately, all of my podcasts are very ocean nerd oriented. So I'm not sure how helpful they are on the broader climate stage. But if anybody wants a list of ocean podcasts, I have quite a list of those. I see some of those. I'll type them in when Statton goes next. But I'm just trying to think if there is anything else to get into it. I don't have any that are actually coming to mind, but besides the ones that what was the podcast that had Ayana on? The How to Save a Planet is one recently that I was listening to a lot. I'm sure a lot of people listen to.
Yeah, that one's great.
Everywhere, I'm sure. But that was great just for learning kind of broadly about climate impacts for me. And did you just want podcasts, or you had another specific question? I'm sorry.
I mean, even books and documentaries. I mean, I grew up watching History Channel and stuff like that. So I love that's how I love learning.
Yeah, I mean, if you know that you like history or climate history, I mean, a lot of the ways that I found this was just searching. I mean, it sounds dumb, but you go on Google and you're like, I literally left my job with the only thing I knew was that I love the sea. And that is all I had to go off of. And so I just started to look up any ocean podcast, any ocean books. And I think after reading 3 or 4, I was like, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to figure out or work on, marine protected areas, but hey, food really interests me. Food plus ocean equals this. And so I just kind of go down these branches. And again, following that same curiosity. So I don't have anything. I'll rack my brain a bit more. And if I think of any, I can send some to Lena too. Also, the sun's going down here. So I'm just going to quickly turn off my video so I can turn off the light. So I'm not disappearing, but go ahead, Statton.
So I did a lot. I'm a voracious reader too, Josh. So I'm building a climate library right now. So I just put in the chat, Speed and Scale by John Doerr, How to Avoid Climate Disaster by Bill Gates, The Unthinkable Earth by David Wallace Wells. If you haven't read those are great. Not that those are great books to just get an understanding of the problem, which throws you into climate depression. But then you get through, especially Gates's book, then you start saying, okay, there's opportunity here, there's solution. Project Drawdown and Regeneration by Lena said those are also really good too. Practical guides more than reading. But all that is good. Now, I don't know much about food and sustainabase, but I wanted to point out that if you go to climate-based jobs, right? climatebase.org/jobs. You can search by industry sector, including buildings, carbon renewal, climate adaptation, coastal and ocean sinks, energy, food, agriculture, and land use, media and journalism, transportation, right? So if you have interest, I was pretty sector agnostic when I was looking. I didn't, say I want to work in clean energy or carbon sequestration or anything. And I didn't know, right? Turns out I like carbon sequestration right now because that's what I do. But you can search for roles that are, specifically around, a sector. And even though I couldn't name, any podcasts specific to, food and stuff, I'm sure there are some. I listened to Outrage and Optimism podcast, which is a good one. It's just as the title suggests. They talk about the problem of climate change, which is alarming. But the optimism piece is it focuses on, companies that are innovating in the space. And I really do think even though the clock is ticking, I think that technology is rapidly scaling to try to address the problem. And the question is whether we do it in time, but it's happening.
Got it. Thank you, guys.
Lena, should we go to Wendy's question?
Yes, absolutely. How do you guys determine if the company you're interviewing with really has the right culture, values, fit? Very good question. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure if there's but Statton, go ahead and answer.
That's a beautiful question as it relates to my earlier point. In every job, I'm a job, because you might be working in a company that's not working in climate. So you don't know, right? You have to ask, right? And I think it's a question that should come in the earliest stages of an interview, right? Is talking to the recruiter and saying, do you have an ESG program? What does that look like? And ask it in every round, at every round, more specifics about it, to see if it's something that is important to the company and the executive leadership team, or the company is just greenwashing, as many do, and is just, paying lip service for this, but not actually doing something. For me, I knew Aspiration was, from the very beginning, a company that focused on the climate problem and was working on sustainability, on promoting sustainability among enterprise companies, and doing work. So it was kind of obvious to me that the culture was going to be a good fit, because everyone was aligned in the overall mission of the company. But I was also pleased to learn that even within the company, there's a lot of ESG strategic work going on that we do as a company. We don't have a big carbon footprint, but we are, also doing investments in carbon sequestration projects, or for the benefit of the company itself. So I think you got to ask. And I think if somebody isn't comfortable with giving an answer or being transparent and straight with you on the answer, that'll tell you all you need to know.
Yeah, just everything Statton said. Plus, if you can find them speaking in anything, like anyone from the company speaking in, for me, I was lucky that Greenwave CEO does a lot of speaking engagements on different podcasts and on YouTube. You can find a lot on YouTube. And so you can kind of get a sense of the way people talk, or the way they talk about things. And like, I even came up with interview questions from listening to like a podcast. I think like he had said something, and then I was like, ooh, do I want that? But then later I, dug into it more, asked about it in my interview, and they were able to explain his position on certain things and what have you. So I would say just able to like go past even of course ask in your interview, but even before that, you can research like a bit more and see if there are people who are talking from that company elsewhere. I found that helpful.
I heard people reaching out to current employees and asking questions about the company. Julia and Statton, did you do something like that, or? not really?
For me, for my current job, like I said, I learned about my job through Work on Climate. It was that she put on, and in terms of, I did end up asking her directly about that, but I made a personal connection after the event that this person gave, and she gave president. She had made some side comment about like a seahorse being somewhere. Messaged her afterward, just being like, "Oh my God, a seahorse in Long Island too." And so she would refer to me as like, "Oh, you're the seahorse person." And so just connecting with people one-off like that was helpful, at least for my own job search, just trying to make those personal connections. And then later, I just asked specifically, how things were run. And I feel like you can tell when people give you that canned answer of like, "It's great," versus them giving you specifics. So I could tell that they were being honest with me and telling me how things were.
Lena, I was typing when you asked the question, so I'm sorry I missed it. Could you repeat it and see if I have anything to add?
Yeah, so before and during my job search, my personal job search, I heard a lot that people try to reach out directly to current employees and connect with them and ask about culture, or I don't know, about the company, questions like that. Did you do something like this or not?
No, I didn't. Although since being an aspiration, people have reached out to me with those questions. So which I was very happy to answer. In fact, there's one woman who I referred for a job at Aspiration, and she's done very well at going through the interview process and is likely to get an offer. And she called me the other day and asked about culture, because it wasn't so much about culture that was focused on climate and sustainability, because she knew that was the case. It was almost like just culture in any work environment, right? Like how especially when the whole company operates remotely, right? We have even before the pandemic, the company was founded 9 years ago, and the founders always had their approach is always just hire the best people. I don't care where they are, right? Just give them a good laptop and collaborative tools, and we'll work. So, but that does have, when everybody's remote, you never have any face-to-face meetings anywhere. There's no office to go to, then the questions about culture are good ones to ask too.
I think it's just about the time, but I have a very last question for you. Do you have any open roles, your department's companies?
Of course. Well, we're not hiring any more legal people right now since I just got hired, but Aspiration, my company, is hiring for a number of roles. And what I would encourage folks to do is, go take a look at what we've got posted. If you see something there, please let me know. I can, explore it for you, find out where they are in the process, whether they're already interviewing, or if, it's a good time to submit a resume. I would be happy to do that for you. So feel free to reach out. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn if there's somebody that works for a company in my network that you'd like to meet. I do keep my network pretty, I don't really invite a lot of people to connect on LinkedIn unless I've met them or know them or have had a conversation with them. So it's a pretty good network. It's full of people that I would not hesitate to reach out to on your behalf. And that's kind of how I did it. Hey, there's somebody I see, somebody at Terraformation, can I have a conversation there? That's how it works.
Yeah, and for me, my nonprofit is much smaller, I think, than Aspiration. And so we actually just hired, are hiring right now for an e-learning designer. And I actually posted the job on Work on Climate. And I always would be happy to refer people from Work on Climate because obviously that's where I came from. So happy to do those things. Besides that, though, nothing else at the moment. But I think that in the coming year, in the next year, there might be something. There's some things coming up. And if that happens, yeah, just absolutely reach out. And just say you're from Work on Climate so I know who you are. That's the worst thing is when someone messages you on LinkedIn, zero context. I'm like, who are you and where did you come from? Because I similarly don't connect with people unless they say like, I come from this space. So
Right.
yeah, that job search advice, if you don't do that already. But otherwise, yeah, happy, just, message me on LinkedIn or on the Work on Climate. You can DM me, I realize. Anybody can on Work on Climate, so you can do that there too. So yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you can reach me on Work on Climate too.
I always forget about that.
Yeah, right.
Thank you so much, both. It was amazing chatting with you this whole hour, and I hope that this series of events will have allow us to have more people like Julia's, like more stories like Julia's who got jobs through Work on Climate networking. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Julia and Statton, for joining us today.
Good luck to everybody, whatever you're up to.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks everybody for your
Yeah.
time. Thanks, Lena, for inviting us. Have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.